Hi, my name is Mark Ellis from Stick and Rudder Studios, and today I want to take you through the X-KeyPad 1.5.1 Beta 17 changes. And the primary topic we're going to discuss is the encoder layouts for the Stream Deck Plus. As you can see from this screenshot here, I've been able to customize the layouts for the little LCD panel above the encoders significantly more than what we were able to do with the prior beta. And what I can control in here now with these layouts is you can control the font size, the font color. You have a little more control over where the lines actually get placed. You also have the ability to add these other elements like these progress bars, okay, which are kind of built into the Stream Deck software. So it gives you an ability to, customize that panel above the encoder a little bit more. So these layouts are defined using a Json format. It's not the most intuitive thing on the face of the earth, so I will tell you that if you're going to do it, you have to have a little patience. You're going to have to do some reading and some experimenting. I did include a number of encoders that have already got some layouts in it that you can use as a template. And I'm going to try to walk you through, what these items are within this JSON format. But I want to be very upfront, okay? The Stream Deck software is pretty sensitive to not getting the syntax right. Like if you're missing commas or braces or, you mess it up, it's just not going to work. And in some cases, the Stream Deck can kind of get locked up, and you'll have to restart it and clear out the layout. But once you get used to it and you use some of the samples as a starting point, you can do quite a bit with it. Okay, so let's just do a quick overview of what these items are within this syntax, and we'll get into more detail when we actually look at it online with the real software. So there are three types of elements you can have in the layout. One is the text element, and you can have a number of these in there. And they're identified by a unique key. So each text element you put in the layout, you have to give it a key that allows it to get associated with the data coming out of X-KeyPad. So the keys we use are line 0, line 1, line 2, line 3, etc. And these line numbers correspond exactly to the line numbers that you get when you do lines within the encoder lines definition thing, and we'll actually go through and see that. Bar elements, these are the built-in progress bars that the Stream Deck SDK supports for the layout on the encoders, and they're identified by the key value 0, value 1, value 2, value 3. Now, this is a little obtuse the way I did this, but effectively, those value numbers are exactly the same as the line numbers when the line layout. The only difference is that what X-KeyPad is going to do is going to look to see if the line only contains a number. If it only contains a number and the number that it converts from text to an integer, if that number is between the number of 0 and 100 inclusive, then it will basically try to set the value to that identifier. So in other words, if line 2 happens to be exactly 80 or 080, it will try to set the val2 element within the Stream Deck. And that's because these bars, that's all they want, okay, for a value. They want a value between 0 and 100 to basically decide how much of the progress bar is going to get displayed and rendered. The last thing we have is an image element, and that's identified by the key name icon. And you can only have one at the moment, within the layout. The layout actually supports more than one, but at the moment, the X-KeyPad software only can select one background image, and that's basically selected on the background image tab in your encoder definition. As we go further on with this, there might be ways of adding static icons that don't change, with the encoder, and maybe you can have a couple of them placed around. But I haven't researched how do we do that, and how do you specify, a static PNG file, within the element. Okay, a couple of additional things that you can specify on these elements. One is the Z order. And the Z order basically determines the order in which elements are going to get drawn on that LCD panel. Lower Z order numbers get drawn first, and then higher Z order numbers get drawn over the top of it. You're also going to specify for any element a rectangle within the 100 high, 200 wide section of the LCD panel that the encoder's got available to it. You're going to specify a rectangle as to where that element's going to get drawn. If none of the rectangles overlap, if there's no overlapping at all, you can set all the Z orders okay to 1, or you can actually not even specify a Z order. But if they do overlap, you have to put in a Z order where it's unique, so that when the Stream Deck software tries to render that panel, it knows what order in which it should draw things. I mean, the typical thing is the icon goes first, so that would probably have a Z order of like 1. And then what you would do is you would put your text and your other things above that, either at a common Z order number above the 1, or unique if you're actually going to have the text overlap each other, which is usually a little odd to do that. In some cases, like on text or in certain elements of the progress bars, you can specify things like border colors and text colors and things like that. The colors are specified with your typical HTML RGB hex values. So it's a string, it starts with a sharp sign, and then it's the hex of red, green, blue. So, if you remember with hex numbers, the letters are 0 up to F, and if it's a full F, that basically means full bright, and a 0 means no brightness. So as example, FF0000, that's basically a very bright red. 00FF00, because it's a red, green, blue, that means that there's no red component, no blue component, and a full-on green component. And then 0000FF would be no red, no green, full-on blue. And you could do combinations of these as long as it's a hex value, and you can get pretty much any color within the spectrum that you want on there. And there are places, many paint programs will let you experiment with these values and see what the color is going to look like. There's also a number of websites that you can go to where you can get like color pickers. It'll give you a color wheel. You pick the color and you'll get the hex value of it. I think you could probably even do this in the Stream Deck software on the normal virtual device tabs where you can use a palette to pick the colors and stuff. So you could kind of get a sense of what the hex value is you need to put in there. And lastly are these rectangles, and this defines the box that the element's going to fit in, and that box has to fit somewhere on the 100 high by 200 wide pixel section of the LCD panel above the encoders. The first number within the rectangle is going to be the X, which is the left offset. That's how far from the left-hand side of the, that 100 by 200, grid. How far offset is that, is that drawing box going to be? Y is going to be how far down from the top it's going to be. The next value is the width. How many pixels wide is the rectangle going to be? And lastly is the height, which is how high the rectangle is going to be. And there are a couple of funny restrictions here, okay? Particularly with fonts, the point size, which pretty much matches, how tall the character is going to be, with pixels. You can't have a rectangle that is smaller than the font size. So in other words, if you make a rectangle with a height of 20 and then you set the font point size to 25, you're going to have a problem. And frankly, I've seen where the Stream Deck layout compiler, it will throw an error and it'll put an error in the Stream Deck log files, but then it gets stuck. In other words, once it gets in that stuck error state, you can't get it out of it even if you actually give it a proper layout. You have to shut down the Stream Deck software and restart it again, with a properly configured layout. So, and I've reported this to Elgato. Hopefully they'll fix it. But just so you know, as you fuss with these layouts, if you don't get the syntax right or you do something dumb, it can have some pretty oddball behavior. So what I recommend you do is start off with one of the samples I've given you and try tweaking those, and don't go too crazy until you know what you're doing. Or if you do mess it up, basically back the layout out, go back to something default, restart your Stream Deck software, and hopefully that'll get everything back to where it should be. Okay, with that, why don't we go ahead, and I'm just going to walk you through again how to install things, just in case somebody's jumping into, this thread, right at beta 17. I want to make sure you know how to do this, okay? So here I have X-KeyPad 1.5.1 beta 17 in my downloads folder. So just to walk you through the installation process, same as what you've done before in the past, you just right click on it, IU7-zip, and just unzip it to that folder. And then in here should be an X-KeyPad folder. You're just going to copy that. And you're going to bring it over to your plugins folder. I'm using Xplain 11 right now, but it'll be the same for Xplain 12. And you're just going to paste it here and allow it to replace any files. If you've got an existing X-KeyPad file folder, just let it replace anything that's in there. And again, I recommend don't try to delete this first before you do this, because you'll lose potentially any images that you threw over there or your license key or whatever. So just let it replace what was already in that folder. Okay. Now, this is very important. The Stream Deck X-KeyPad plugin has to match the version of X-KeyPad you're running. If it does not, I can guarantee you it's going to crash and do ugly stuff, okay? At some point, I'm going to add some checks in there to make sure that you're not running a X-KeyPad Stream Deck plugin that doesn't match up with your X-KeyPad plugin. But at the moment, I don't have those checks in there. So you need to make sure that you've got the beta 17 X-KeyPad plugin installed. So let's take a look again at how you do that. So you're going to bring up your Stream Deck software. If you've already got the X-KeyPad plugin in, if I get a right click on it, you see it says that it's beta 16. Just uninstall it. Make sure it goes away like that. Yep. And then what you do is just going to come over here. You're going to navigate into your X-KeyPad folder. You're going to go to SD plugin, and here you should have the plugin file. And all you have to do is double click this, and it should automatically use the Stream Deck software to install it. It should install, and just to verify it, right click, and it says it's beta 17, 1.5.1.17. Now we're good to go. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring up Xplain and kind of walk through how this works. Okay, so I'm not 100% sure I know where you're at with your configurations, but what I would recommend is, if you've done anything, back up your configurations, or maybe load a plane that you haven't done any Stream Deck configurations on first, okay? Just so that, if you try to import my new sample, you don't end up overwriting anything that you've already done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. I'm going to open the Stream Deck configuration editor, and I'm just going to quickly come in here and clear out what I've already got here. Okay, and then I'm going to do a file append. Go to Resources, Plugins, X-KeyPad, Samples, Stream Deck, and here's the Stream Deck generic, definition. And we're going to go ahead and open that. And what I'd like to do is show you here on the definition list, if we go to encoders, a couple of things I've done is I've modified the transponder encoder, the barrel encoder, and I've also added this new one called the audio volume encoder. And we're going to take a look at each of these and see how they look. As a matter of fact, if I come over here and bring up my Stream Deck software, you can kind of see that I currently have right now is showing you these 3 new encoders on here, okay, that I've got configured. So you can see what I did with the transponder one. I've made these numbers down here bigger. And if I just turn the encoder, you can see how it, how it moves. But I've made the font bigger on it. So let's take a quick look at the layout for that and see how I did that. So we're going to go to the layout here, and because this font's really hard to see, I'm actually going to go ahead and put this in, an editor that is actually pretty good at looking at JSON format. So I'm just going to do a copy here to copy this to the clipboard. Now I'm using Visual Studio, but I'm sure if you look, there's probably a number of other JSON file editors out there that might make it just a little bit easier to look at the syntax and stuff. But I'm just going to come in here real quick and do a new file. And I'll just pick a JSON file here. And I'll paste it. And we'll get rid of this to make it a little bit bigger. Now you can see this thing's highlighting, telling me I've got errors here because I didn't paste it properly, so it had an extra set of braces in here. But let's take a look at how this is working. So this is the format of the layout JSON file. You can see here that I have line 0, and that is starting at no offset from the left, no offset from the top. The rectangle is going to be a full 200 pixels wide, and it's going to be 25 high. And I've set the font size to 25 pixels, so that's good. That's going to fit within that. If I had this size bigger than that, I'm going to have a problem, okay? And then the weight is simply a number that indicates, kind of like the boldness of the font, okay? And you can make this a little bit smaller to give it a thinner point size, or as you're going to see where I did with the, with the line that's got, the actual transponder codes in it, it's fatter, okay? Then there's another line here. It's the same font size and the same weight, but you can see that what's happening here now is the offset's different. It has no different offset from the left, but it's offset from the top by 25 pixels, and that's because it needs to accommodate the fact that this one's going to get drawn and it's going to take up from 0 to 25. It's still 200 wide, and it's going to be another 25 high, okay? Same, weight. You'll also notice here that on the alignment here, I've got these aligned to the center. So the text is going to get drawn within the center of the rectangle. You can put left or right in there if you want the text when it's drawn to be aligned to the left of the rectangle or right justified on the rectangle. Okay? You'll also see I've got the Z orders here, 2, 3, and then 4 and 1, which we'll go over here in a minute. Now, the reality of it is I don't think any of these rectangles actually overlap each other. So I probably could get away with at least all of the text elements being the same Z order, okay? And then the last one is this line 2, which is actually going to end up being, if we come back here and we look at this real quickly, this is line 0, the XPDR, code is line 1, and 4123 is line 2. And you can actually see that. If we come over here and we look at lines, you see it's 0, 1, and 2. Right, so line 0 is the XPDR text, 1 is the code, and then 2 is the 4123. Okay? Let's come back over to here. So in this guy, again, no offset from the left. It's now 50 pixels down from the top because it's accommodating these two lines above it. 25 and 25, that makes it 50. It's going to be 200 wide. In this one, I'm going to make it be 50 high, which, by the way, at that point, it's now taken up the entire 100 pixels high, height of the LCD panel, right? 25 plus 25 is 50, plus another 50 gives you 100. I've set the font size on this to be 50 points. That's what's making it bigger. And I've also set the weight a little bit higher, so it goes from 600 to 900, means that the thing's a little fatter. And if you take a look at that, you can kind of see that. You can see how these guys up here are kind of a thinner weight on the font, and this is fatter, okay? And the last thing in this element is the icon, which is basically for this one, all it is a blue, it's a blue PNG file. It's got no other image in other than a blue background. And this guy's got no offset from the left, no offset from the top. It's 200 wide and 100 tall. So basically, this icon takes up the entire area of that LCD panel above the encoder. And I've also set the Z order to 1. Typically on the icon, you're always going to want that to be the lowest one drawn, and then your text and bars or anything else that you have get drawn over the top of it. Okay, so that's an example of this guy here, the transponder. Now let's take a look at the barrow. I did something very similar, but I changed the color, on this. So let's do the same thing. Let's come on over here. I'm going to adjust the barrow knob so that it comes over. I'm going to go to Layout, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm just going to put it over here in this better editor. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can edit it right within X-KeyPad. The only trouble is the font's a little small, and it doesn't format it as nice. And you can see if you get a good JSON file editor, it highlights things, okay? So this guy is very similar, right? You'll notice at line 0 and line 1, they're the same. The one thing I did is I did specify the color as white. I think that's the default color anyways, but I could change the color on those if I wanted to. But let's take a look at line 2. This is where I made a change. Bring it up here again. It's a bigger font, it's a bolder font, and I changed the color to green. So you can see where I specified this here. Same height as the transponder code. It's a 50 pixel high one. Same weight of a 900 font, but look at what I did is I changed the color. So here the color is just no red, all green with the 2 Fs and no blue. So that's how I get a green, a green image there. Okay, let's take a look at something really sophisticated here. Let's take a look at this volume control that I did, which basically adjusts the audio volume. So I'll actually turn the encoder here. So as you can see, that's actually adjusting the X-Plane audio volume up. And you can actually do these for like radio volumes and all kinds of crazy stuff. But let's take a look at how I did that. So we're on the audio volume guy. Here's the layout for it. First off, let's take a look at the lines, because I had to do the lines a little bit differently here. If you go back and look at this, you're going to notice that there is this text down here which says 0%. That's actually going to be a text element. However, the bar wants a value that is just a number. There can't be any percent signs in there, decimal points, or any of that stuff. It just wants a plain integer number between 0 to 100. So what I had to do when I created these lines is I had to make it look like that, right? If you look at this guy, I'm going to actually have to make this X-Plane window a little bit bigger to see this. You'll notice that I'm using the master volume ratio, and that is a floating point number that goes from 0 to 1.0. I needed to scale it up, so I put a float scale factor of 100, which will now get it to a value between 0 to 100, which is kind of what I want for that bar, and that's how I did that. This guy here is the same thing. It's the master volume, again with a float scale factor of 100 to basically scale it from a 0 to 1.0 to be a 0 to 100. But I also then added a extra line segment here, which has got the percent symbol in it, space percent symbol. So this is what I'm going to use for the section where it's saying like 20%. This line here is the one I'm going to use with val 1 to drive the bar indicator on the layout. And then the volume is just the static, volume text. Okay? So let's go back and look at that layout again. And again, let me copy the layout. Copy. Go back over here. We'll paste this all in here. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. Line 0, this is going to be the standard text, 25 high, within that rectangle, and this is what's going to basically say volume. Okay. The next thing I have here is a type of bar. And there's two kinds of bars you can have. I'll put in a link in for where the documentation is on the Stream Deck layout JSON file, but you can have a bar and a thing they call a G bar, which has got a little triangular, decoration there. And then there's some subtypes you can have. So what I'm driving this is val1. That's basically line 1, just so to remember how this works, okay? Come over here, look at the lines. Line 1 here is the 0. Or if I increase the volume, you see how it goes up. It's just a plain number, no percent sign. It's got to be a number between 0 and 100. Okay? And here's the rectangle for the bar. And this value here, it's got to have a value in there. But as you turn the encoder, that's what X-KeyPad's going to do, is it's going to change this value based upon what the actual volume data, but actually it's what line 2 ends up being as a number. It's going to jam that in here, and that's what dynamically changes it. And then last we've got line 2, which is the green text, which is showing the like 20% or 25% or whatever, right? And that's just a plain text. And then we've got the icon, which again in this example, it is it's actually a blue background, but it's actually got a little picture of a speaker in there, and we can actually see that if we come over here to the background images. That's the background image that I'm using, and it's actually a 100 high by 200 wide image, which is, you want to make your images for the layouts, you want them to be the right size, you want them to be the right proportion, to what that layout is, which is a 100 wide by, or 100 tall by 200 wide. It just doesn't show, it shows up kind of screwed up here because the way I'm rendering this, I always render it as a square, and I need to change this so that if it's not a square, it actually renders it exactly the way it looks, which I'll fix that in the next beta. So you can kind of see how this is working. I first ends up getting is this little blue image with the speaker gets drawn on it. Then it's going to draw the static text volume, which comes from that line layout. Then it's going to draw the bar, and as I turn the volume up and down, you can see that the bar not only moves, but also that text with the percentage, moves. So I think you get a sense of how you can do this. And if you don't like the layout, if you want to get rid of it, you could just, clear it, like that. And if I come back over here and look at it now, actually I have a bug here, because what it should have done when I cleared it is it should have put this back to something default. So I have to figure out why it's not, why it's not doing that when I clear it out. But I'll fix that. It should have cleared it out when I cleared it. But I think you get a sense of how this all works. It's going to take a lot of experimenting, and I think as we get better at this, I'll start doing some better samples, and I'll do a much better write-up and documentation and tutorial video on how to do this. But I think you get a good enough sense on it that you guys can play with it, and I will in the documentation show you a link to where the details are for what the specifications and how to do these layouts in the Stream Deck SDK. All right, enjoy. And please provide any feedback in the explain.org forum. Thank you very much.